You're walking down a quiet street when a stranger asks to borrow your phone. They need to make an urgent call. You hesitate. Something tightens in your chest. In that moment, a calculation runs beneath your awareness. Not about the phone itself, but about the nature of people. Can this person be trusted? What if your answer to that question, not just in this moment, but as a general stance toward humanity, was shaping your happiness more than you realize? One of the largest psychological studies ever conducted has just answered that question. Researchers analyzed nearly 1,000 studies involving more than 2.5 million people. Their finding cuts against everything our cautious modern instincts tell us. People who trust others more, including complete strangers, are consistently happier. And it gets stranger. The relationship works in both directions. Trusting makes you happy. But being happy also makes you trust more. A loop that spirals up or down. Before we examine what this research reveals, we need to understand what psychologists actually mean by trust. It's not naivety. It's not blind faith. Trust is the willingness to make yourself vulnerable based on positive expectations of another's behavior. It's a calculated openness, bet on humanity with skin in the game. Psychologists distinguish between different types. Interpersonal trust is what we feel toward people we actually know. Friends, family, colleagues we've worked with for years. Generalized trust extends to strangers. That baseline assumption about whether most people can be counted on. It's the default setting you carry into new encounters. Then there's institutional trust. Confidence in larger systems like government, media, and organizations. Each type shapes our experience of the world differently. Modern life has trained us to be wary. We're warned constantly about scams, taught to verify everything, and exposed to endless stories of betrayal and deception. This protective skepticism feels rational. Smart, even. But what if this constant vigilance comes at a psychological cost we haven't fully calculated? The researchers behind this massive meta-analysis wanted to know, across all the evidence, across cultures and contexts, what's the real relationship between trusting others and being happy? The meta-analysis, published in Psychological Bulletin, drew from nearly 1,000 individual studies. It represents one of the largest investigations of trust and well-being ever conducted. The core finding was remarkably consistent. People who tend to trust others more report higher levels of happiness and greater satisfaction with their lives. But here's where it gets interesting. The researchers discovered the relationship is bidirectional. Trusting others makes us happier, and being happy makes us more likely to trust. As the Utrecht University researchers noted, trust and well-being appear to mutually reinforce each other over time. This creates a feedback loop with profound implications. If you start trusting more, you become happier. That happiness then makes you even more trusting. The cycle compounds. Your psychological wealth grows. But the reverse is equally true. Distrust breeds unhappiness. Unhappiness breeds further distrust. A spiral that can trap people in an ever-narrowing world of suspicion. Not all trust is created equal. Interpersonal trust, faith in people we actually know, showed the strongest connection to happiness. This makes intuitive sense. The relationships we invest in most deeply, friendships, family bonds, close colleagues, are where trust matters most for our daily emotional experience. But generalized trust, that baseline faith in strangers, also showed a significant effect. Believing that most people can be counted on predicts greater well-being. This finding challenges our protective instincts. We're taught that trusting strangers is naive, perhaps dangerous. Yet the data suggests this stance carries its own cost. Institutional trust, confidence in government, media, and organizations, showed the weakest association with happiness. The connection was real, but notably smaller. Perhaps our personal relationships and assumptions about individuals shape our daily emotional lives more than our feelings about distant institutions. The research revealed something unexpected about age. The trust-happiness connection varies dramatically across the lifespan. It's not constant throughout our lives. Children, teenagers, and older adults showed the strongest links between trust and well-being. For these groups, the ability to trust seems especially consequential. Young adults and middle-aged people showed weaker associations. The researchers speculate this reflects different developmental priorities at different life stages. For children, learning to trust may be foundational to healthy development. They're building their basic model of how the world works and whether people are safe. For older adults, trust may become crucial again as social circles shrink and isolation becomes a genuine threat. Maintaining faith in others keeps connections alive. The middle years, focused on career building and raising children, may involve different psychological priorities. Trust matters, but other factors dominate. Recent research published in Psychology Today examined something even more granular: the power of brief encounters with strangers, the everyday moments we often dismiss. Researchers found that small gestures acknowledging strangers, a brief greeting, a simple hello, a nod of recognition, increase social confidence. These micro-moments predicted greater daily well-being. The quality of passing encounters with people we'll never see again actually shapes our happiness. West and colleagues found that when people feel their community is generally safe and trustworthy, they're more likely to experience positive interactions with strangers. This suggests trust creates its own conditions for positive experiences. Expecting the best from people opens doors that suspicion keeps firmly closed. But environment matters. Research in the Journal of Happiness Studies found that economic inequality reduces trust in strangers, creating barriers to these beneficial interactions. When resources are scarce and competition fierce, trusting strangers feels riskier. The calculus changes. Our brains adapt to the world as it actually is. This helps explain why trust levels vary so dramatically across societies. It's not simply cultural preference. It's often a rational response to real conditions. Some researchers urge caution. The meta-analysis doesn't distinguish between warranted and unwarranted trust. Not all skepticism is pathological. In societies with genuine corruption or danger, distrust may be adaptive. The happy, trusting person in a predatory environment is not wise. They're vulnerable. The research shows correlation, not simple causation. Happier people may trust more because they've had more positive experiences. Their trust is earned, not naive. Yet the bidirectional finding suggests both mechanisms are real. Trust leads to happiness and happiness leads to trust. The cycle can be entered from either direction. This raises a provocative question. In a world that constantly warns us to be vigilant, are we systematically undermining our own well-being? Every fraud warning, every news story about betrayal, every reminder to verify before trusting. These messages accumulate. They shape our default stance toward others. The intent is protective. But the cumulative effect may be a population increasingly primed for suspicion, increasingly isolated behind walls of careful verification. Social media amplifies this. We're exposed to betrayal stories from around the world. Rare events feel common. Our sense of how trustworthy humanity is becomes distorted. So what might we do with these findings? The researchers and psychologists reviewing this work offer several practical suggestions. First, consider practicing what might be called microtrust. Small acknowledgments of strangers. A greeting, eye contact, a brief nod, that carry minimal risk. These moments build what researchers call your trust muscle. Each positive micro-encounter reinforces the belief that most people can be counted on. You're not taking large risks. You're gathering evidence. Each brief positive interaction becomes a data point that shifts your baseline assumptions about humanity. Second, notice your default assumptions about others. When you meet someone new, what's your starting position? Suspicion or openness? This default isn't fixed. It's been shaped by experience, media consumption, and stories you've absorbed. Recognizing it as a choice gives you power to adjust. Third, recognize that the trust-happiness cycle can spiral in either direction. If you're caught in a distrust cycle, breaking it may require acting as if you trust. This isn't self-deception. It's running an experiment. Try extending slightly more trust than feels comfortable and observe what happens. Gather new data. Fourth, consider how the age findings might apply to you. If you're caring for children or elderly parents, fostering their ability to trust may be especially important. Children learn trust from watching how adults interact with the world. Modeling appropriate openness, not naivety, teaches them how to navigate relationships. For older adults facing shrinking social circles, maintaining connections often requires reaching out despite uncertainty. The research suggests this effort pays psychological dividends. If you're in the middle years, focused on career and family, trust may matter in different ways. Your close relationships deserve the investment the research highlights. The research also points to something larger. Trust is not just an individual trait. It's shaped by the communities and systems we inhabit. Economic inequality, as the studies show, erodes generalized trust. Addressing the conditions that breed suspicion may be as important as individual attitude shifts. When communities invest in safety, fairness, and reliable institutions, they create conditions where trust becomes rational. Individual openness and structural conditions work together. This might be the deepest insight. Trust isn't naive or shrewd, it's relational. The wisdom of trusting depends on the system you're trusting within. But within systems that are reasonably trustworthy, which describes most daily interactions for most people, defaulting to suspicion carries a cost. So perhaps the question isn't whether you should trust more. Perhaps it's whether you've accurately calculated the cost of trusting less. 2.5 million data points suggest that cost is higher than we think. The walls we build for protection may also be walls that lock happiness out. Tomorrow, a stranger will ask you for something. Maybe just directions. Maybe to borrow your phone. In that moment, your default setting will activate. That setting isn't destiny. It's practice. And like any practice, it can be changed. The question is whether you're willing to run the experiment.